Hi, we're very happy to be here with you today in the Governor's Innovation for Education workshop. We're going to start briefly with some introductions and then have a great conversation about some innovative new programming that we're working on together. So my name is Cindy Jutman. I'm the Dean of the College of Education and Human Development at the University of North Dakota.
I'm Steve Holland. I'm the Superintendent of Schools here in McKenzie County School District number 1 in Wofford City.
Great. And so we are going to take some time today to talk about some of the unique issues that are confronting rural schools. This is something that UND has really, in the last few years, started to refine our focus and try really hard to develop curriculum and training opportunities that will best prepare teacher and leadership candidates for working in rural schools. And we're very excited about this initiative. We think it's something that is central to our identity as the University of North Dakota, and we are looking forward to finding new ways to do some important and really positive things for smaller and rural school districts. I will say in part, this is a passion project for me. I graduated from the North Central School District in Rock Lake, North Dakota, way back in the 80s. That's a school district that unfortunately has been closed now for almost 10 years. But that small school experience is something that has been extremely formative in my understanding of education and the incredible value that education has for kids, and really wanting to make sure that we do what we can to provide innovative access to education to kids throughout the state. So with that in mind, what we've been doing the last few years in the College of Education and Human Development is looking for opportunities to engage specifically around rural education issues. We've recently joined the Rural Education Collaborative, and we have some startup funding with them that we're really excited about. And last year, we launched a signature program that we're going to spend time talking about with you today, funded by the Burgum Foundation, which, they are so generous in their support of rural schools in North Dakota. This particular program is a master's in rural education, and it's delivered as a cohort model where we can work with a group of educators in a given school district in order to help them better develop both their own educational experience, but also have it be focused on the issues that are particularly relevant to them in their school district. And so we are truly excited that our first partner in this endeavor is Wofford City Schools. And so Steve and I are going to be talking a little bit about that program today, in addition to some other issues that are really important for rural schools in general. So with that, Steve, I'll kind of ask if you want to just start by sort of talking a little bit about the Masters in Rural Education program that we are working on with you in Wofford City, and the kind of impact that you think that this is having on your school district, both the teachers and the kids in the school district, as well as perhaps the community more at large.
Sure. Well, as a school district, we've been looking into a model like this for a while. We really felt that we were in need of looking at some teacher leadership models. And obviously, as we've grown as a school district, we were looking for opportunities to provide to our employees that we obviously don't have a university system in our community. And we wanted to reach out and find ways to make it easier for our staff to pursue their graduate studies and to become leaders within our school district and kind of build a system within as far as teacher leaders. Because as we continue to grow, we were adding different levels of staff. And again, finding the shortage and the challenges of bringing people in, and wanted to start to cultivate that within our system with a program. So this came at a great time, and we really gratefully appreciate the Burgum Foundation and their support of that. We had a very high level of participation this first year of the cohort system. We're very pleased with how this has turned out. Our staff is very pleased. And as far as a school district, it really met a need for us, which was to provide a lot of younger staff. Obviously, with our growth, we had majority of our staff are younger in nature. So they're also starting families, they're very busy. So finding the flexibility, the support of a cohort system, and then the financial support from the Burgum Foundation was huge for them. We had a large number of staff that were wanting to pursue, didn't have the opportunity, and saw this as a great opportunity to pursue it. So that's been significant for our school district, for our community. It means hopefully recruitment and retention. As we've grown, staff retention has been an issue, as it is for a lot of school districts. And we really wanted to improve that factor. We think this program is a significant way to improve that over the long run.
Yeah. Well, and I want to highlight a couple of things you said there that I think are really important. I mean, in addition to the tremendous financial support, which of course is a huge factor, and I second your appreciation for what Burgum has done, what the Burgum Foundation has done there. I think it's also really critical to highlight that the access to university education is tough when people, that finding a way to make sure that we can bring the education to your staff as opposed to them having to leave their jobs and come to the university, I think has been a really important aspect of this. And I think this cohort model is really interesting because it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid. Now, COVID this year changed it, so that was mostly online. But the goal, I know, is to do some instruction right at the school, have some things online, and really have very limited need to come to campus. And so I'm part of that goal, of course, then is to keep people right there in the community where they're needed for work as well.
Yeah,
So
that was a huge advantage for us in this system. As you mentioned, the hybrid I think was really attractive for us. I think that that's important for, I know the employees that were looking to take advantage of the program, having that support of that cohort, having it come to our community. As we've learned now in the last several months, online has its place, but I think the ability to have a presence and have professors coming out to our community, and then be able to apply the things that are going on in our school district, so that it really becomes a very applicable program that we're working
mhm.
that our school district is going through and the challenges they're seeing every day. And then again, that support of that others in their cohort, I think, was huge for our staff who are going into it. So it's been a great model, and our employees have really appreciated it.
Yeah. Well, cool. That's great. What do you think? And maybe it's too hard to know because it might be too early on, but what kind of impact do you think it's having on the classroom or on the students in the classroom? Do you think that you're going to see effects down the road from that?
I would hope so. I think that certainly whether or not those that are in the program are going to get leadership positions in our school district in a certain period of time, but going through the program, you can tell that the awareness of going through the program and how it changed their perspectives a little bit and what they do in the classroom every day.
Mm-hmm.
It is making a change. I think very much being more aware of the bigger picture of what we talk about. The work that goes in the classroom, but the challenges the school district's facing, and I think it's given some of those that are part of the program an idea and a perspective they didn't have before, which I do think it inevitably comes into the classroom and makes for a better classroom experience and makes for a better teacher.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, you've mentioned a couple of times that, that your particular school district has gone through lots of changes. And I know in the last decade or so, I mean, Watford City has really experienced some substantial changes that have impacted the schools, including some really notable growth, which might make it a little bit different from some other schools that are rural, but it's still really a significant factor to consider. What are ways in which these changes have led to you having to develop new innovations for your school district or start to do things in new ways that might be solving different problems than you had to before?
Yeah, it definitely forced us into a different mindset. Obviously, when growth is one thing, but the rapid pace of the growth that we experienced for several years was certainly a challenge, and it forced us to adapt. Flexibility became the key. All of our staff from all levels had to adopt a little bit different of a mindset as far as being creative. We had to
Mhm.
a lot of things, including configurations and building use and employee housing, and all of those issues were dealt with fairly creatively. And
Uh-huh.
we had to have staff buy in, and so that as we made these changes, it may not have been the best choices in their minds, but we knew we had to make them and we had to adjust. So it did
Mhm.
create a culture, I think, somewhat of innovative that, we had to step outside of our boxes and get a little bit uncomfortable, but still find a way, keep students as the center and the focus. And I think for a lot of ways that kind of embraced a sense of change in our school district that has helped us.
Mhm.
And I think we've become much more student driven. When we had our demographics change, these were students that we hadn't had in the past as far as their backgrounds. We had almost all 50 states represented in our school district at one time. You go back a few
Wow.
years. So we had to learn to find out where that student was when they came into the school district and find the best way to meet their needs. So we became much more individualized in our approach, which I think was very beneficial in the long run. And programs like our EL department, really started from zero. We currently have 220 students in our EL program with about 10 staff members. So
Wow.
we really became a school district that embraced diversity and any of the learning models that were necessary to meet the needs of the student.
Yeah. Well, that's when you think about, that's really remarkable. Even just that one example to go from 0 to 220 in an amazing short amount of time. And there's something you said that I think is really interesting too, that somehow the district started to embrace the idea of change. That's tough to be able to make the shift to seeing change as a positive. Are there things that you can think of that led to that, or discussions that were really important in terms of helping people move in that direction?
Yeah, it's a good question. School building climate and culture really become key in those because, as everybody knows, change makes everybody feel relatively uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's never a smooth process, but I think transparency and communication are key. You can never have enough of that.
Yeah.
I think we always tried to be clear of what the goals were, what we were trying to move towards. So even when we went through all of our building reconfigurations, we had a master plan. We were moving this, but we were always looking ahead to the final product. We knew there were better things coming. So keeping that level of optimism with staff and give them as much support as possible. We gave them a voice. We allowed them to provide ideas. We tried to be innovative, and I think that was the one thing. You become a little bit reactive when everything is changing that quickly, but we also wanted to stay a little bit proactive too. We didn't want to simply react to everything. We tried to look ahead and always tried to keep the students at the center. All the changes, all the noise that was happening around us, it was still just about education, students in the classroom, and doing what we can on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. There's some really good principles that come out of there, right? Student-centered, transparency, communication, and those are things that could translate a lot across lots of different kinds of changes in lots of different school districts.
Sure.
Yeah. And it also made me think of one of my favorite quotes is Wayne Gretzky always says, "You should play for where the puck will be, not for where the puck is." And that's kind of part of what you're saying. You couldn't always worry about, okay, the change is now, what's going to be tomorrow? It might be what's going to be 2 years or 3 years out. You can't just worry about the next day, but you have to really think to that upcoming goal.
Yeah, I think that really helped. I think that we always had those longer term goals in mind, so we know we were always moving in a direction. And our worst fear was to have to undo something. We wanted to make sure as we were making changes that we were keeping the big picture in mind, that we didn't underestimate anything, that we had contingencies so that we were allowed to kind of grow into these areas, and we made sure that we had buy-in from our community, that we had a good plan, and to keep staff always engaged in that process. And again, it's easier said than done, and I won't say that it was perfect, and we had a lot of teachers that obviously struggled with the changes, and just they were moved quite a few times. Every year we were kind of adapting. We had class sizes that were a little bit larger than we would have liked. And we worked in areas that we typically weren't designed to work in for classroom. We had portable things like that. But to their credit, they rose to the occasion. And I think build that culture of family and a sense of belonging, and that good times were still ahead. And the community itself always stayed upbeat with all of our changes, and that really helped too. We always had community support. So there were a lot of external factors that really helped as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's cool. Well, one of the things that, in North Dakota, we're fortunate. We have several really good teacher ed programs and a number of school leadership programs across several campuses throughout the state. And you could say almost an embarrassment of riches, right, in terms of how many training opportunities there are. And I think it's really, this particular program has been great because it's a partnership between a school and a university. But I also think it's worth thinking about, are there other new opportunities that you've thought of, or that we could try out in the state by trying to form more partnerships between teacher ed programs or school or ed leadership programs and school districts? Are there other ways we could be engaging in more communication between K-12 and higher ed in order to bring more innovation to the state and to the school districts across the state?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's obviously opportunity to do so. And I think, as far as the details, that becomes a real challenge. But I think that with the speed of which things change, in K through 12 on an annual basis. I just don't think there's enough. The more partnerships and the more ongoing communications we have, the better. We feel value in that, having that level of a partnership and communication there, because I think that is where, we have students that are very well prepared when they're coming to us, but I think that there's a lot of other factors that come into it when you're becoming a K through 12 teacher and coming in new to a community that do catch them off guard. And I think that there's ways that we could bring more of those actual experiences to them, so they don't quite have that learning curve as much. And like I said, if it's not the classroom, it's the other factors that go into play, the general overwhelmness of the job. I mean, any school district now probably has about 5 or 6 initiatives it's working on right now, and they've been staff working on them for several years. And then you're thrown into that environment as an early teacher, trying to jump in the middle of these initiatives and feel like you're doing all those things, and then getting accustomed to what it really takes to get the job done. And I think it's always been a tough transition, and I think it's not getting any easier. A lot of the challenges we're facing. So I do think that, and I don't know, what methods they could be, but I think that more of those type of partnerships and open communicate that the teacher ed programs can provide some of these actual experiences, implement the challenges that each school district is experiencing firsthand. So there's just a little bit more of that awareness of that whole atmosphere when they come into our schools.
Well, that's an interesting point. I'm thinking about so much of the focus with students, and not surprisingly, right? Because they're learning all these huge things, but much of their focus tends to be on classroom management, the skills involved in teaching, as opposed to understanding what it is to be part of a school system. I mean, because most of us, when we learn stuff, we're a little bit self-centered, right? We're focusing on like the task that we have to learn. But it sounds like if we could find a way to help minimize the adjustment to recognizing that the classroom is definitely one important part of the job, of course, but then there's also being part of this whole educational system that has its own moving forward process. That might be something that it would be useful perspective for students to start to develop as they are engaging in student teaching or whatever experience.
Yeah, I do. The collaboration piece, I know as a district now, I mean, everybody's involved with their PLCs and so forth. There's just a lot of things that now, moving parts in a school district that are outside that actual classroom instruction and, the classroom management piece. And I think getting accustomed to that whole atmosphere, the pace of things sometimes and the expectations, I think is a little bit of something that catches some of our staff off guard. And anything we could do to kind of build some of those into their programs so they're prepared for that atmosphere, I think would help, because beginning teachers are overwhelmed anyway, I think, just with the classroom piece. But when you throw the whole atmosphere and all the different moving parts and the strategic plans and the school improvement initiatives and all that, you could see where it can be a very overwhelming experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's an interesting thing to think about. And I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary training and interdisciplinary programming anyway, in general. The idea that, most of us get better at our own when we see ourselves in relationship to other kinds of professions. And I do think it's exciting to think about how we could integrate that a little bit more, maybe into some of our teacher preparation work too. That's a great thing to think about. This next question is kind of shifting the focus a little bit, not so much from the teachers, but to the students in the school district. There's a lot of interesting research out there about career development for kids that talks about that one of the main ways that kids develop career goals or career interests is through exposure. And one of the challenges that comes up for kids in rural schools is that they might not have direct exposure to a huge range of professions, especially professions that are more focused on some of the things that are emerging as important, like technology and those kinds of things, right? So kids tend to orient around thinking that I want to grow up to be something that they've seen. And I'm just curious, and when you start thinking about the ways in which the world of work is changing and all those kinds of things, what are things that rural schools can do to bring more exposure to kids that helps show them the wide range of careers that they could be moving toward? Do you have thoughts about that at all, or things that might impact your students that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Our school district has been really engaged with workforce training and career development. Obviously, in our geographic location, workforce is a huge thing in our area. The struggle to obtain workforce, and obviously there's evidence
Mhm.
the energy industry, but workforce maintains a need regardless of those ups and downs. So we put a lot of effort into trying to expose students in various ways to that. And our legislature has been doing some very proactive work with looking at getting CTE centers and academies out now in more areas. That I think that's very helpful to reach out to some of those rural areas so they have some centers to connect to that can provide some of those hands-on experiences. So I think we're really excited about that opportunity and the idea that now more of that flexible atmosphere of which education can come in a variety of ways. It can happen in your building. It can happen outside your building. It can come in apprenticeships. It could come in different work experiences.
Mhm.
We have a career work experience program that has been very successful in our district. And one of the things that a lot of students mention upon graduation as far as being a real meaningful one for them. And so I think it's very critical, and we've been certainly trending, as most school districts probably have, to students that are not pursuing those long post-secondary pursuits. A lot of them are looking at more of the shorter term, the training, the certificates, and there's certainly
Mhm.
employment in those areas. And I think we're kind of excited about utilizing some of that flexibility of getting students more involved with employers in our area. And
Mhm.
we've done a lot of bringing speakers in to our system. And we're just continually surprised by students of how maybe unaware they are sometimes of what is out there, because it does
Yeah.
change so frequently. It is hard to stay on top of that. But I think that's going to be one of the bigger things the next several years is going to be those CTE and career opportunities to all areas of North Dakota.
Yeah. Do you think there's been a change in the sort of in terms of employers reaching out to people when they're younger? I mean, I would imagine maybe especially in your part of the country, but increasingly labor is an issue everywhere, not just in like the energy industry. So have you noticed that kind of change?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more engaged industry would like to work with us as far as what we're utilizing in the education process. Not that we're going to educate anything differently, but we can incorporate things that they're going to see in these employment atmospheres into their education and meet the standards that we're meeting. So we find ourselves using different tools in our setting that our neighbors and industries are not using, and there's no
Mhm.
if they're going to be possibly going on and getting employment and using certain software. If it meets the standard, why aren't we using that same software? And I think
Mhm.
industry and businesses have been very open about working with us on that, about some of those skills and some of the tools that students will be using in employment. And we've been trying to open to say, well, there's no reason we can't incorporate that in the education process. So again,
Right.
it's not changing what they're learning, but why not use tools that they're going to see possibly in employment when they're in K through 12 and meet the same.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, as long as they're learning what they need to learn, if the structure or the process or the mechanism they use to learn it is more conducive to a future workplace, I mean, that's that's like double learning, right?
It's a
Yeah,
win-win there, and I think that's what
yeah,
we're pushing is to work with the business and industry and the school district so we can collaborate more than being isolated as we have been in the past, maybe.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Okay. Well, so the final question that I have for you, again, a little bit of a shift, but one of the big things that we talk about a lot in North Dakota, of course, is the teacher shortage, especially in rural schools. It's well documented. The state has tried a lot of different things to try to address that in a number of ways, and I know you've talked about that before too. That you briefly earlier on, you said that recruiting, and retaining teachers, is a big challenge. What are some things that you think might be the most difficult challenges? And are there things that you would like to see us try in the state or in where that haven't been done before that might help with this idea of recruiting teachers to small towns, but then importantly keeping them there, for some period of time, hopefully out of desire to stay. Thoughts about that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a major issue, and we've dealt with the same thing. And I don't know if there's a real easy answer. Obviously, the profession in many ways isn't getting a lot easier, and the shortage, and there's just so many options for employees now for young teachers. And I don't know, whatever we can do to incentivize that. I think some of those programs have worked. I think we've always said that getting some of our younger staff outside those more urban areas is probably the biggest challenge. We felt like if you can get them out to an interview, you've got a chance, but sometimes they see a rural area and they don't even really give it a look.
Yeah.
And I think that if they would just, that open-mindedness of getting out and seeing it and giving it a chance, I think is kind of half the battle. So anything we can incentivize that, in programs like this that provide opportunities, you can get your master's degree in a rural area. You can do all those things. You don't have to utilize, some of the resources that they have in some of the larger areas. You can have some of those same benefits and still live in that rural community. I think for many, that's probably almost an ideal setting. And I think if we continue to move down that road, I think we can. There's some factors we can't mitigate. Sometimes the social of the rural areas is, for young people, is a challenge, and a lot of them start having families. They move back to where their family's from. But inevitably, I think whatever we can do to get staff out to our rural areas, and then it becomes part of the job of the school district to try to retain them and provide them leadership opportunities like we're talking about here, so that they feel like they can grow. The rural districts don't become a stepping stone to somewhere else, but that they can actually utilize their leadership skills and growth in those school districts and not have to leave.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, a take home point for me that's really important in that is, I love what you said about if you can get them out to interview, oftentimes, if you can get them there, that you have a chance of getting them to come and work. And, and that really comes back, thinking about our end of the process of how do we get more students excited about rural schools through student teaching? How do we get more creative and innovative student teaching opportunities set up in small schools so that people do have a chance to go and see what an impact they can have, and see what the quality of life in small towns? Because I do think that that's something that if people haven't experienced it, they don't know that it's there. And how do we help get that funnel at least pointed in that direction in some way is probably the next step to take.
I think so. And there's some false perceptions about rural areas sometimes. I don't know, we had that even out in some of our areas with the energy development. So I think it's breaking some of those perceptions that employees have, or that, what is here. And like I said, if they come out here and experience it, they find out that maybe this is something that they would really enjoy doing. So.
Yeah, great. Well, Steve, our time has gone super quickly. I thank you so much for this great conversation today. I think it was really interesting. I learned some new things, and I appreciate so much you being willing to respond to so many questions.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate obviously the support of UND, the Burgum Foundation, for allowing us to try this program, and we're really excited about continuing to work together on these initiatives, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, great. Well, and I think it's just as a point to close on, I think what's really cool about, in addition to the experience that the students in the program are going to get and earning master's degrees, but to be able to engage in conversations, to be able to have university staff and school staff talking about these issues and recognizing how important it is to have those based in the school, but also that these conversations apply to a lot of other schools. I think this is a way we can create meaningful change, right? To get more school districts and more higher ed faculty just talking about these things and brainstorming and thinking about what we could do a little bit differently to put a positive spin on what is possible and what kinds of things can be out there that can change education in North Dakota. So that's a great gift of a program like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.